Hey, hello. My name is Tarn Adams, and I'm the co-founder of Bay 12 Games, which I run with my brother Zach. And our main game is Dwarf Fortress, which we've been working on since 2002. And so let's begin. So, what is Dwarf Fortress? Dwarf Fortress is a fantasy world simulator. At least that's what it aspires to be. We're focused on telling stories within a world that's generated for each player individually. It's a single-player game. And you can play many times in the same world, and the history is saved, and you can continue to tell stories. You can pass it along to your friends, your world, if you like, but mostly it's a single-player game. You can inhabit a few roles right now. There's the colony of dwarves. They mine into the mountain and find minerals, and you can make different types of craft items, and there are things like invasions and trading and that sort of thing. It's like a colony management game. Or you can play as a single adventurer. It's like a regular RPG or a roguelike game. You can just wander around the world. There are things like quests, or you can just go into a bar and sing for people, or write poems. There are several things to do. It's more incomplete than the other part of the game. And finally, you can just go read the history if you want. It generates the world. We'll go into the generation of the world later in the talk, and you can just look at the history. A lot of people, that's the only way they interact with the game, is to just look. So it is a text game. This is Dwarf Fortress. We have dwarves, little happy-faced dwarves. Workshops, bedrooms up at the top. There's stone that's been mined here. It's a game where you look at a slice of a three-dimensional world. So this is a hillside, and this is just the sky below that's above the lower part of the hill. This is a very small fortress, but you can dig out however you like, and you usually can get up to, say, 200 dwarves. They all have names, they all have feelings, they all have little jobs you can assign to them, and that's what that mode looks like. Then there's the adventure mode. This is a single adventure up here in the center of the screen. It looks like a regular roguelike, but this one is traveling over the world, so you can see a river, you can see a forest. There are a few villages at the top of the screen, and then there's a castle at the bottom part of the screen. And finally, there's the Legends mode. This is just the history of one of the generated worlds. This is the year 138 and 139. These are the most important things that happened, but you can look at many more events. And you can just look around at what's going on. So my brother and I, we have been kind of playing games our whole lives. I was born in 1978, and there were games then. They looked more like this. These are our primary inspirations for Dwarf Fortress are rogue and roguelike games, just kind of dungeon crawling games, but the dungeons are randomly generated. There are things like the sim games, like that's Sim Earth up there. Starflight is a planetary exploration game, but the planets are all generated. There are more things like that today, but this was very interesting back in 1986. And then there's the Ultima series, which let you explore a world. It wasn't randomly generated, but it was a large world, and they tried to simulate as many things as they could. And we see ourselves as a kind of continuation of that way of thinking, to just try and simulate as many things as possible and let the story come out of that. So aside from playing games, my brother and I were writing games as long as I can remember, we learned to program at the same time we learned to read. And we made all kinds of games together. They're lost. I have no pictures. Arcade games, strategy games, little spaceships flying around, and I do have some pictures. This is from a long time ago. This is our first fantasy role-playing game that we made from 1990 onward. It lasted about 6 or 7 years. And these are 16-color EJ graphics. It's the same as Dwarf Fortress is now, sadly. And we've always been working on something like that. I was in school. I was a graduate student in mathematics when I started the web page. We had just been doing games together and playing them, just the two of us. But eventually we decided to start sharing. So we put up a web page in 2000, and it looked worse than this. Well, this is the current version of the web page. The older web page was much worse, if you can imagine. And so when we put the web page up, we were working on our second fantasy role-playing game, which looked like this. This is Slaves to Armok, God of Blood. It was a 3D game. We didn't know what we were doing. And there was no game, really. You wandered around. We thought at the time that it was very important to build from the bottom up and to get all of the systems in place for things like creatures before we worried about things like civilizations. So we had the ability to stand on any limbs that you select. You could stand on your hands, you could stand on a hand and a foot. It would come up with an animation for it. They were all terrible. And it had all of the tissues of your body. It knew how curly the hair on your arms was. It could change the textures. If you, say, lost an eye, it would change the texture. It was very strange. And very slow to develop because we didn't know what we were doing, and it had 3D graphics. So we had many side projects at the time, like games like World War I Medic and Liberal Crime Squad that we released on the web page, and we started working on another one a couple years after we put up the web page called Dwarf Fortress. And it was a text game, as you've seen, and so it just took all of the ideas that we had from our other fantasy games and incorporated them very quickly. And it eventually took over from this project, and we released Dwarf Fortress in 2006, it was very exciting, and we'll get to how that turned out at the end. So here is world generation. Let's just talk about how this part of the game works. This is a map you can see here with mountains over on the right and forests and swamps on the left. So the idea first is to make just the map itself without worrying about civilizations or history. And how we did that was to think about what makes a biome a type of environment for creatures to live, or like a forest or a swamp, without just painting them. You can do that. You can paint forests, and you can see many games that just kind of paint their biomes, and it's fine. And we just wanted to make it more realistic and to have the little individual pieces available, like rainfall and temperature. So what we did was we broke the biome into pieces. We have a elevation map. This is just one world. It's a fractal. We used a type of a very, very simple type of fractal called midpoint displacement. It's just fast, and we didn't need really good results. So you may not be able to see them. For instance, there's rivers you can just barely make out. Maybe the rivers there. There's an erosion algorithm. The elevation works with fields like rainfall to come up with how the rivers are formed. And we run many fake rivers to kind of carve away the land, and then we run the final rivers after that. So this is the elevation map, and then this is a temperature map. It's hotter in the center and colder at the poles. And you can see some blue spots in the center. Those are where the mountains and rainforests are. Those places tend to be cooler than places like deserts. And we have a rainfall map. You can see here at the top where the mountains have blocked the rain from the direction the wind is coming from. So they drop the rain on one side of the mountains and it's dry on the other side. So it's very simple. You can see it's all horizontal. We don't have very good wind patterns, but we did a little bit with that. And finally, the most simple of the four components that we used to build a biome was drainage. It's just, is it a swamp or is it a forest? Is there water that stands on the ground? There's not a way to get that from temperature, rainfall, or elevation, so we just threw in another field. And so what this gives us is a biome map. This is the final biome map for that world, that set of world data that I've been showing you. So you can see now the mountain range is gray up at the top, and it's dry on this side. And we have a tropical ocean band in the center. So this is the type of terrain that you'd be playing in. And if you put all of the history and other elements and elevation together, it looks like this. You can hardly make them out, but there's little farmland here, little human civilizations. You can barely make out little black lines in the mountains. Up here. It may be very hard to see, but those are tunnels that dwarves have carved between their fortresses. And we can look at that a little bit here. So taking just, first, here's what it looks like in text. It's not zoomed in, so you can't see, but these are text symbols for the same map. So if you have this map and this map, this is just the text version of the map that you'd actually be seeing in play. So if we zoom in a little bit, this is year one, and we can go forward in time. You can watch, say, the top left portion, and you can see the civilization spread. This is year 100, 150, and then because of memory limitations, they can't found any more sites. So by year 250, we just have, for instance, this site up at the top right there, it gets destroyed by a dragon. So this was 250 years, and you can see a lot has happened, and these things are actually happening in a sort of data sense. There are 20,000 historical figures. There are 1,000 sites. It knows the exact populations in all of them. It knows the exact amount of farm animals. It runs weekly industries like milking cows and making cheese. And it knows about territory. Here's a map. A territory map. This is the year 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. And it's just running essentially like a game like Civilization, just running it and seeing what happens. And it kind of delivers this world to you at the end. We have, here you can see the trade networks. There's a lot of little arrows between the different towns. The green arrows represent farmers that just bring their goods to a market, and the yellow lines are major trading routes. So it keeps track of all this, and then you can go in and play in the different modes. All of this information is respected. So This is a village map. We have maps for all of the sites. If there was, say, 1,000 sites, you can see the little houses here, farms everywhere. These are all randomly generated maps. There's a kind of manor house here at the bottom. And then the larger towns look more like this. You can, if you're playing an adventure, you can visit any building there and the people that live in it. All of the yellow buildings are bars that you can visit and order drinks and so forth. And there you see a castle in the center. And finally, a capital city looks like that. And they're all randomly generated. They do end up looking fairly similar to each other, just in the general sense right now. We have this purple is a temple. There's a keep in the middle, and many buildings, a few thousand maybe, I don't know. So that's a basic overview of how the world is generated, and then you go on to play the game in there. So we released the game in 2006, and at the time we had only maybe 50 people that had played any of our games for 6 years. And I was working, so I didn't have to worry about the money. It was just something fun that we were doing. And we had a forum that we created in 2001 for those people to just play with each other and talk to each other. There weren't that many of them. And when we released Dwarf Fortress, it all became more exciting. We have 3,000 people on the forum now that are active members. And you can see here they've posted 14,000 suggestions on how to improve the game. And we have 3,000 active bug reports too, maybe one for every member. Now that this is sort of the hub of all of our activity for Bay 12 Games, is these people that talk to each other, and having a community like that really sort of incubates all of your success. It's one way to do it. There are different paths to being able to continue making games. And for us, it was the forum community. They've done our bug tracker. They manage it. They did all of the ports to Linux and Mac for us. They produce all kinds of stories and artwork and videos. It's really it's been amazing what happens when you just nurture a community. Of course, it needs to be nurtured because forums need to be moderated, and it can be very exciting at times. But it's been worth it. And also in terms of exposure for your game, word of mouth, people just talking to each other is one of the best ways to do it. And people know other people, so we have all of the press coverage we've gotten, especially at first, just came from someone on our forum that knew someone that wrote for a magazine, or someone on our forum that was an intern at a magazine and snuck one of our games onto the CD in the magazine, not necessarily with permission. And it grew from there. So it eventually culminated with one of the magazines that wrote about us knew the curator of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and was able to suggest Dwarf Fortress as one of the first 14 games that they brought into the museum in 2012. And it's just luck, basically. There's a lot of hard work in building a community, and then what happens after that, you just kind of put yourself in the best position you can, and things can happen. So we were very fortunate to have the success that we've had in that. And now Dwarf Fortress is a free game. You can just download it now and play it. We do just ask people for money. That's all we do. It started in 2006 before we released Dwarf Fortress. Someone just wanted to give me money for my birthday, one of the 50 people on the forum. And so he wanted me to put up a PayPal button, and I did, and I got $75, and that was nice. And when we released Dwarf Fortress, we didn't know what would happen. I had quit my job right before we released Dwarf Fortress because I was tired of it, but we didn't know what would happen. We had absolutely no idea. And the numbers were okay. They started coming in, and people started talking to each other, and it was just enough to survive at first. And we had a little bit of money saved, so we were able to keep going. And we have, you can see here, whenever we release a version, people just give us more money because they hear about it, and they feel like it's a nice thing to do, I guess. As the same thing happens on Christmas. There are spikes there. And most recently, we've had success with Patreon, which was interesting for us because it was the most like what we had already been doing, just asking for money. And people just need to press an orange button, and they give you money every month. So that's a new service that is it's very good for us and a few other people. It really depends on sort of what you're comfortable with and what your model is. This turned out to work great for us for what we want to do. So when people send us money, we send them rewards back. We send them a story, or we send them crayon drawings. In the last 8 or 9 years, we've made over 2,000 crayon drawings and mailed them all over the world. We've sent one to Busan. And there was a request. Someone wanted a steam mechanical monster. So we drew it. We've drawn everything, all kinds of things. And it's just part of our sort of relationship with our community. They trust us. We make promises and we keep them. We try not to hype the game. When we release the game, we make sure that people aren't too excited because it's always a recipe for trouble when people think that they're going to get something that they're not going to get. And we always write things down that we said that we're going to do and make sure that we either do them or apologize. And as long as you work at it, you can keep your community with you. And if your community gets large enough, you can keep doing what you love to do. And that's it.
예, 다시 한번 탄 애덤스께 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 감사합니다. 지금부터 10분 동안 휴식 시간을 가진 다음에 구글 플레이에서 다음 세션을 발표하도록 하겠습니다. 예, 10분 동안 쉬도록 하겠습니다.